and it comes from Lucan right through Tala, or Trendalkin, Tala, across into Rathfarnham, Templeogan, Terranure. So it also has a couple of villages in Newcastle and Sagard and Rathcoole, so with a little bit of a rural area, but it's mainly a large urban area. Just in context of, and our presentation is particularly in relation to international protection applicants, just to note that in the first instance. So when I'm talking, that's particularly what I'm talking about. There's 14 accommodation centres in South Dublin for international protection applicants. There's 77 in total in Dublin, so quite a large amount of accommodation centres. But in South Dublin in particular, there's some quite large accommodation sites. We have Red Cow, we have the City West Transit Hub, and we have City Art on the same piece of land. We have Crooksling, which is out in British near Wicklow, which has nearly 466 IP applicants in the last couple of weeks moved in there. Interestingly enough, that represents 14% of the national figure of IP applicants in the country in that small slip of land in South Dublin. That's from the figures that are produced every week by the IPO office. So I had a look at it last Friday. Nationally, 35% of all IPs are in accommodation housed in Dublin, and that's not even counting those who are sleeping rough around Dublin. So it's a huge concentration of IP applicants around the greater Dublin area as well. So, where did the fact and fiction leaflet start? So I'm going to go on a little meandering journey, so bear with me for a minute. I just wanted to note first off that we're part of the Community Integration Forum in South Dublin, and that's where the conversations about this started. And that Community Integration Forum in South Dublin has been really effective in relation to responding to and working together on the challenges that have arisen from the war in Ukraine and the emergent refugee crisis. And for me, it's been a really good and supportive space to work in. I suppose we're all unique, but we felt we were quite unique in South Dublin in relation to our work around integration, and particularly our work in this space, because we had the National Ukrainian Transit Hub, which sits in City West in the convention centre there, so sitting slap bang in the middle of our county. And over 100,000 Ukrainians has transited through that hub in the last 2 years. Our claim to fame with our volunteer centre is that we've only sent 2 people on the wrong bus, so we always hope that the people who went to Limerick made their way to Sligo eventually. It has also now morphed into also a large international protection transit hub with bed spaces for 600 in the space as well. So whereas the transit hub itself has a large national focus, it is situated in a specific geographical area, and that requires local responses to emerging issues that are happening in that geographical area. And one of the things that has always been really helpful for us in our work there has been that every time we go to the Community Integration Forum meetings, the first question that's always asked is, what's happening in City West and how can we help? So we've had so much help from the other community partners that sit around the table around the Community Integration Forum. So why is our organisation in City West, I suppose, is the next question. So our volunteer centre has been running a community volunteers programme in City West since the beginning of the pandemic. So we worked alongside the HSE, and we managed a team of nearly 500 volunteers helping the HSE with the testing and vaccination programme. So we've been on the ground for a long time there. And in March 2022, we were patting ourselves on the back and winding down and going, that's it, our work is done. You know, not that the pandemic is over, but the large vaccination programme that was going on in City West was over, and we were just going to take a deep breath and relax for a while. And we got a phone call from the Department of the CD, as we call it, saying to us, listen, City West is now going to be used as a hub for Ukrainians arriving into the country. Could you come in and give us a hand for a few days while we set it up? And that was 2.5 years ago, and we're still there with a large team of volunteers helping out in City West. So we have a team of volunteers who are doing meet and greet all the time in the space, and one of the things that has been really great with the community volunteer programme and the volunteers that we have in there, it has given us a space to allow international protection applicants and beneficiaries of temporary protection to volunteer with us in that space. So what we've done in particular is we've facilitated many of the international protection applicants who moved to new accommodation, who were living in the transit hub to start, they move into new accommodation in South Dublin and they can come back and volunteer with us. And it's been a huge success because a lot of the lads in particular, because it's mainly single males that are in the transit hub, they know the site, they can translate for us in a lot of times. They have a lot of cultural sensitivity that not that we wouldn't have it, but they have specific issues around cultural sensitivity that they can raise with us. And they also were able to raise issues with us that were emerging in the transit hub that we wouldn't have known about. So we had a lot of lads coming in, volunteering every day and going back to their accommodation. And in conversation, and I think it's really important to stress, there was no complaining here. We just had some of our volunteers telling us that when they left City West at 8 o'clock at night, particularly in the winter months, they were going back to their accommodation and they were sitting outside on the wall for 3 or 4 hours at night because there was protests outside their buildings and they couldn't get back in. They weren't complaining, it was simple acceptance, but we were the ones who were incensed by that. We also started finding out that some of our volunteers who were coming from the direct provision sites were actually saying that, ringing us at the last minute saying, we can't get over to volunteer because there's protesters outside the building and we're not allowed to leave. So we used the community forum as a space to raise this issue, particularly since we have the Gardaí present at that forum, so it's really good to have their ear and see if it could be addressed. And it seemed to us, from a policing perspective anyhow, that what we were being told is, in order to keep everyone safe, this was just how it had to be. And we kind of felt, well, where is the fairness and the justice in that? I suppose the community forum up to then had been working on problems. We'd never had some philosophical conversations about our community. But from these conversations, we actually had a wider conversation with the community forum about what we were seeing and hearing online, and the disinformation that just seemed to be creeping into the wider conversation in our county. We had a frank conversation about how people were taking as facts the things that we hear all the time. We were all hearing about the unvetted males coming into Ireland, the fighting age males in our community, people coming here because they were all going to get great social welfare and none of them wanted to work. And the reality is, we were hearing this on the ground and we weren't hearing it from the far right. We were actually hearing it from our friends and our families and colleagues and people who we met through clubs and other settings, who weren't racist or far right. They just knew no better. There was an information vacuum that was existed and that hadn't been challenged strategically. We were all doing our individual bits and trying to challenge the narrative in personal conversations. But like, I play golf and I was in a golf club, and many people would know I would work with refugees and asylum seekers, and they'd sidle up to me and, not meaning anything bad, but I'd say, do you know, I really like all these, you know, I think we should be doing our bit. You know, people are coming in here getting 250 euros a week and it's not right. And I would say, well, actually, the payment for those in international protection is 38 euros. And the thing that people unknowingly said to us was, why don't we know this? Why is no one telling us that? Because they're just hearing a particular narrative online that wasn't being challenged nationally. So as we felt at the community forum that we were never going to be able to convince a particular cohort why refugees and asylum seekers come to Ireland, but there was a wider middle ground that we could educate and fight for, as opposed to trying to engage with and debate with the extremes. And so there was a decision at the community forum that in the absence of what we felt was top-down information campaign, that there was an onus on us to address the information gap that existed in our county. And so, having made the decision at the community forum that we were going to do something about it, the next piece of that jigsaw came when we decided who would lead the information campaign and how it would look and how we would roll it out. And I'm going to hand you over to Simon then to talk about that. And I'm going to miss all of the slides, so sorry about that.
One of the leaders on this, I suppose, was my predecessor, Larry O'Neill, and I just want to acknowledge his passion and drive to get this out there, and particularly before his retirement date. This was one of the key things he wanted to tick off before he finished. It's a real privilege to be here today and to be speaking with Tricia as well, who I've known and worked with since probably about 2008 in various different guises and forms. And you know, I'd love in some ways to be speaking about the work of Trina and Berta and the migrant integration team in the partnership in South Dublin County. But then when Francis spoke, I think this morning, about the work that's going on in Monaghan, I really felt that he was speaking for all of us as well, and the work that's going on in all the different partnerships at the moment. And in some ways I kind of feel like this is part of my initiation. When Michelle was phoning me up and saying, will you come along and maybe present on the work that you're doing? But it's been such a journey, even the 2 months I've been here, because we are really part of like a wider team, even within the circle. And I think it's important to say that this tied in with a piece of work that the mayor at the time, Councillor Alan Edge, had taken on himself as something that he wanted as one of the key initiatives for his 1-year term in South Dublin County Council, which was to develop a mayor's charter. And the idea of this charter is that community groups would then sign up to that. And I think what's so interesting about this is, whereas the leaflet, as I said, it can be quite a cold document or co-leaflet and say like, here are the fictions that are out there and here's the actual narrative that we want to get out. The Mayor's Charter takes a different approach, and it's about, I suppose it goes beyond dispelling that false information, and it talks about kind of welcoming people and helping them flourish and prosper. And so 80 community groups signed up to this in the South Dublin County Council region. Of those, you sporting groups like Clondalkin Rugby Club and Thomas Davis GAA, numerous drug projects and traveller projects, projects and community groups for older people and new clubs as well. And I think I was really challenged actually by one of the comments that Sabrina said today, which was, you know, who did you meet today? And that line as well, I was even thinking of, you know, as Tricia was talking about the golf club that she's involved in, and I'm involved in a sport club as well, and I was like, actually, we've been really passive about this. You know, it's not that we've done anything wrong, but we haven't been proactive in this. And this community charter in this area was a great way for groups, you know, it may be 80 groups that have signed up, but it's representative of thousands and thousands of people. One thing actually, the community education team, I was chairing one of the meetings, and actually all the councillors, this is pre the election, said that they were really surprised in a good way about the conversations that they were having in relation to immigration and migration. And I think there was this overwhelming sense that the whole narrative was being controlled by a very small minority, I think, at the time. And what has been really great about today's conference, as well as getting to meet loads of people and hear what's going on across the country and listen to some really interesting speakers, is that it's also been a challenge to Tricia and myself and to others as well around, okay, well, what do we do next? Because this is just a once-off campaign. This isn't like a full stop at the end of it for us. And so there were kind of three things that we felt that were important for us, even in our conversation and preparing for this presentation. We're really looking to build up ground of community engagement. We're looking to encourage other groups to lead on the issue as well and to use their reach into communities. And then we want to see that complemented with a top-down approach from government in terms of communication on these issues. I think for us, and look, there's loads of examples, and every organisation will probably have examples for this, but one of the most powerful things I think that I've heard or that has been told to me since I started was that bit around the othering of migrants, and that, you know, I think sometimes if people want to get involved in, let's say, the sanctuary runners, other groups where you can kind of, there's that integration, there's people who are willing and really want to get engaged in that, and then there's people who don't have an interest in that. And we have a project in West Tala for kind of young people who aren't engaged kind of in other services, a lot of street work involved in this project, and a lot of work through sport as well. And so they run a Friday night football, and it was for kind of 16 to 20 young people. And then Paul, who oversees this project, got 4 young people from City West to come down and play football on Friday nights as well. And he said probably the most impactful thing was that one of the guys came up to him and said, afterwards, said, "Paul, see that guy over there?" And Paul was expecting the worst. He said, "He's sound." And he said, that, he said, like, that just changes the narrative. It just changes the dial and shifts it just ever so slightly. And I think, look, that's really what the Fact and Fiction leaflet and the Mayor's Charter was all about. It was just one part of a larger puzzle, I suppose. And this really, well, it's a story of our work. It's a really collaborative approach. I think in terms of the volunteer centre, the partnership, the Mayor's office as well, but also the whole Community Integration Forum as well. And looking at how we start to tackle disinformation on new arrivals in our community. So thank you very much.